Among the many characters who cross paths with Tony Soprano, few illustrate the destructive nature of greed as vividly as Davey Scatino. A childhood friend of Tony's, Davey is introduced in the second season as a seemingly ordinary suburban father and sporting goods store owner. Yet beneath his respectable exterior lies a compulsive gambler whose inability to resist temptation leads to ruin. His relentless hunger for more, his reckless disregard for limits, and his willingness to gamble away stability in pursuit of fleeting rewards. Davey's downfall begins with his obsession with high-stakes poker. Despite knowing he cannot afford it, he begs Tony for a seat at the infamous executive card game. Tony warns him against it, reminding him of his past failures as a gambler. But Davey's greed blinds him. For Davey, the possibility of winning outweighs the certainty of financial collapse. This moment captures the essence of greed, an insatiable desire that overrides reason, responsibility, and self-preservation. Once Davey buys into the game, his life spirals quickly. He loses heavily, borrowing money he cannot pay back, and in doing so, hands control of his future over to Tony and his crew.
You're doing a good job.
The debts pile up, and when he cannot make good on them, Tony seizes his sporting goods store as collateral. The shelves are stripped bare, the business is bled dry, and what once represented Davey's livelihood becomes just another front for the mob. Greed has not only destroyed his finances, but has also dismantled his sense of identity as a provider and small business owner. What makes Davey's story tragic is not just the ruin he brings upon himself, but the collateral damage inflicted on his family. His wife becomes embittered, and his son Eric is pulled out of his dream of attending West Point because Tony demands restitution through Eric's SUV. Davey's greed for more money, more thrills, more chances at winning results in less for everyone he loves. The cost of his sin extends beyond himself, leaving his family humiliated and his relationships fractured. Davey Scatino is not portrayed as a hardened criminal or a malicious man. Rather, he is ordinary, flawed, and painfully human. This makes his embodiment of greed all the more resonant. Unlike Tony, whose pride sustains his empire, Davey's greed dismantles everything he has. He becomes a cautionary tale within the series, a reminder that unchecked desire for more, when combined with weakness of character, leads only to loss and degradation. It always demands more, no matter the cost. Davey Scatino exemplifies this truth. His craving for high stakes leads him to gamble beyond his means, sacrifice his family's security, and ultimately surrender his dignity. Few embody one of the 7 deadly sins as clearly as Ralph Cifaretto does with lust. Lust, in this context, is not only about sexual desire, but also about the reckless indulgence in pleasure at the expense of morality, responsibility, and restraint. Ralph's life is ruled by an insatiable hunger for gratification, and this compulsion not only defines his character, but also fuels much of his violence, cruelty, and eventual downfall. Ralph's lust is most vividly expressed in his sexual behavior, which is often extreme, degrading, and dangerous. His relationships are defined less by intimacy than by domination and cruelty. His fixation on Janice Soprano, for example, quickly devolves into volatility, while his sadistic desires with others reveal how lust for him is inseparable from power and control. Nowhere is this more disturbingly clear than in the horrific scene with Tracy, the young stripper he brutalizes and kills. This act of violence is not simply an outburst of temper, it is the darkest expression of lust desire twisted into sadism and destruction. Lust also governs Ralph's broader lifestyle. He chases thrills in every form, whether through gambling, drugs, or reckless affairs, never satisfied with moderation. His need for stimulation leaves him impulsive and unpredictable, and though he is capable of making money and wielding influence within the mob, his lust for pleasure constantly undermines his position. Even when Tony tolerates him for his profitability, Ralph's behavior ensures he is always teetering on the edge of banishment, or worse. At the same time, Ralph's lust underscores his moral emptiness. Unlike Tony, who wrestles with guilt and morality in therapy, Ralph feels no need to justify his actions. For him, indulgence is its own purpose, and he gives little thought to the consequences for others. This absence of reflection makes his lust especially dangerous, because it is unchecked by remorse or self-awareness. Whether humiliating others for amusement or engaging in degrading sexual practices, Ralph reveals how lust, left uncontrolled, erodes empathy and humanity. Ultimately, lust becomes Ralph's undoing because it fuels both his alienation from the family and Tony's eventual decision to kill him. His sadistic impulses, his inability to control himself, and his relentless pursuit of gratification make him impossible to trust and impossible to keep in line. What could have been a long and lucrative career in the mob collapses under the weight of his unchecked desires. In the framework of the 7 deadly sins, lust represents the abandonment of reason in the pursuit of pleasure, and Ralph Cifaretto embodies this sin completely. Less than 1% of all you guys watching this video are subscribed to my channel. If you enjoy The Sopranos, please subscribe to the channel. Enjoy the video. Richie Aprile, one of the most volatile figures in The Sopranos, is defined not only by his brutality, but also by his deep sense of envy. Fresh out of prison after a long sentence, Richie returns to a world that has moved on without him. The mob he once helped build now operates under new leadership, and the younger generation has taken the wealth and respect he believes should be his. This resentment festers, and envy becomes the driving force behind his actions. More than greed or wrath, it is Richie's jealousy of others' success and power that shapes his downfall. Richie's envy is first directed at Tony Soprano, who rose to become boss during Richie's incarceration. Richie cannot accept Tony's authority, believing that he, as a senior member of the Aprile family, deserves more recognition. His constant undermining of Tony, whether through disrespectful remarks or outright defiance, stems from his inability to tolerate another man holding what he feels should rightfully belong to him. Envy blinds Richie to the practical realities of power and leaves him consumed with bitterness. His envy extends to the younger generation of gangsters, particularly Christopher Moltisanti. Richie openly mocks Christopher's ambition and resents the fact that young men with less experience now enjoy status, wealth, and opportunity. In Richie's eyes, their success is an insult to his own sacrifices, and instead of adapting to the changing times, he stews in jealousy. This resentment reveals how envy poisons not just his professional relationships, but also his perspective on life. Richie's personal life also reflects envy's corrosive power. His relationship with Janice Soprano becomes a twisted partnership built on resentment and ambition. Richie envies Tony's control, and through Janice, imagines himself taking a share of that power. Yet their bond is fueled less by love than by shared bitterness and a desire to topple Tony. Envy drives Richie to conspire, to rebel, and ultimately to overestimate his position in the family. The destructive nature of Richie's envy is most apparent in his inability to play by the mob's rules. While other characters temper their ambitions with loyalty or patience, Richie's jealousy overrides all restraint. He cannot accept his diminished role, cannot swallow his pride, and cannot let go of what others have achieved in his absence. This leaves him reckless, dangerous, and ultimately doomed. His sudden death at the hands of Janice underscores the self-destructive nature of envy. It consumes him so thoroughly that he never achieves the power he so desperately covets. In the moral language of the 7 deadly sins, envy is the resentment of others' blessings and the belief that what they possess should be yours. Richie Aprile embodies this sin in its purest form. His jealousy of Tony's authority, Christopher's potential, and the shifting landscape of the mob world fuels his anger and his downfall. Paulie Walnuts stands out as one of Tony Soprano's most loyal and long-serving soldiers. He is often the source of comic relief, with his eccentric habits and superstitions. Yet beneath the humor lies a darker, more dangerous truth. Paulie personifies wrath. His quick temper, readiness for violence, and inability to let go of grudges make him the embodiment of this deadly sin. Unlike other characters whose sins stem from desire or pride, Paulie's defining trait is his uncontrollable anger, which fuels much of his cruelty and instability. Paulie's wrath is evident in how easily he resorts to violence over minor offenses. He does not simply enforce Tony's orders. He takes pleasure in punishing those who displease him, from shaking down small-time earners to lashing out at innocent bystanders. Paulie's rage is often disproportionate to the situation. For him, anger is not just a reaction, but a way of asserting power.
What do you hear? What do you say?
His fury becomes both a tool of intimidation and a personal indulgence, leaving those around him fearful of his unpredictable outbursts. His wrath also manifests in his paranoia, suspicion of others. Paulie frequently assumes disloyalty or disrespect where none exists, and his temper drives him to lash out preemptively. This is seen in his feuds with fellow crew members, where minor slights escalate into lasting animosity because Paulie cannot forgive or forget. His inability to control his anger poisons his relationships within the mob, leaving him isolated and distrusted despite his long service. Even in his personal life, Paulie's wrath is destructive. His strained relationship with his mother figure, Nucci, and his cruel treatment of others in his neighborhood reveal a man incapable of compassion when anger takes hold. Rather than seek understanding, Paulie defaults to bitterness, lashing out at those who fail to meet his expectations. His anger not only fuels violence in the streets, but also corrodes his private life, leaving him emotionally stunted and alone. What makes Paulie's wrath particularly tragic is that it often undermines his own ambitions. Though fiercely loyal to Tony, his volatility keeps him from being truly trusted as a leader. His inability to control his temper makes him unreliable, and though he craves respect and recognition, his wrath ensures he will never rise much higher than a soldier or captain. Anger defines him, but it also traps him, limiting his potential within the very organization he has dedicated his life to. Within the framework of the 7 deadly sins, wrath represents not only anger, but also the destructive consequences of letting rage control one's actions. Paulie Galtieri is the perfect embodiment of this truth. His explosive temper brings fear to others, but leaves him empty, alienated, and unable to grow, while gluttony is often reduced to overeating. In its deeper sense, it refers to overindulgence, excess, and an insatiable appetite for more, whether that be food, wealth, revenge, or power. Phil's defining flaw is precisely this inability to stop consuming. He wants not just satisfaction, but total domination, and his gluttony for vengeance and authority ultimately leads to chaos and his own destruction. Phil's story is shaped by his refusal to accept enough. After spending decades in prison, he re-enters the mob world hungry for lost time, lost status, and lost respect. Rather than seeking stability or rebuilding carefully, he dives headfirst into overindulgence, demanding recognition and revenge for old grievances. His feud with Tony Soprano illustrates this perfectly. Even after practical compromises are offered, Phil cannot be satisfied. His appetite for payback is endless. He does not simply want fairness, he wants to consume everything Tony has, crushing him completely. This gluttonous hunger for vengeance is coupled with Phil's excessive need for power. When he finally takes control of the Lupertazzi family, he pushes beyond reason, ignoring diplomacy and balance in favor of domination. His appetite for control becomes destructive, not only to Tony and the New Jersey crew, but also to his own men, who tire of his relentless demands and harshness. Like gluttony at the dinner table, Phil's leadership reveals a man who cannot stop taking, who cannot push back from the table even when he already has more than enough. Phil's gluttony is also reflected in his personal worldview. He constantly revisits slights from the past, chewing on grudges that should have been put to rest. His bitterness about Carmine, about his years in prison, about perceived insults from Tony, all point to an excessive dwelling on injuries. Rather than moving forward, Phil feeds endlessly on anger, growing more bloated with resentment the longer he stews. His inability to let go is another form of indulgence consuming negativity until it consumes him. Ultimately, Phil's gluttony leads directly to his downfall. His unwillingness to settle for compromise fuels open war with Tony, destabilizing both families. Even his closest associates begin to see that his appetite for more power, more revenge, more punishment has become unsustainable. In the end, Phil is literally cut off mid-indulgence, ambushed at a gas station with his wife and grandchildren. His death is sudden and grotesque, symbolizing how overconsumption leads not to satisfaction, but to ruin. In the framework of the 7 deadly sins, gluttony is about excess without restraint, the refusal to recognize limits. Phil Leotardo embodies this sin through his insatiable appetite for vengeance and control. He cannot accept balance, cannot stop taking, and cannot see when he has already won. Tony Soprano, the conflicted mob boss at the center of The Sopranos, embodies many of the 7 deadly sins, but none so powerfully as pride, his constant struggle for control, his insistence on respect, and his refusal to acknowledge weakness or vulnerability reveal pride as his most defining trait. Unlike greed or lust, which appear in fleeting moments, pride is woven into the fabric of his personality and shapes nearly every choice he makes. From the very beginning of the series, Tony makes it clear that his reputation and authority are non-negotiable. Any slight, no matter how minor, is treated as a direct threat to his identity as a leader. Whether confronting a business rival, disciplining a member of his crew, or even asserting authority at the family dinner table, Tony cannot allow himself to appear weak. His sense of masculinity and power depends on being feared and respected, and his pride will not allow compromise. This need for dominance often escalates conflicts that could have been avoided. revealing how pride drives much of his violence. His panic attacks expose the fragility he tries so hard to conceal, but even then, his pride reframes them as inconveniences rather than symptoms of deeper issues. Rather than use therapy to change, he uses it to polish the myth he tells himself about being in control. Violence, too, is often tied directly to his pride. Time and again, Tony's most brutal actions are less about survival or profit than about maintaining respect. When he perceives betrayal, disobedience, or mockery, his instinct is to retaliate harshly, ensuring that no one forgets his authority. Pride demands not only that he win, but that others recognize and submit to his power. This relentless need to assert himself prevents him from showing mercy and often leaves devastation in his wake. Ultimately, Tony's pride proves to be his greatest flaw because it blinds him to reality. He believes he can control both his family and his criminal empire, but his children rebel. His marriage deteriorates, his associates betray him, and the law is never far behind. Still, he refuses to acknowledge limits or to accept responsibility for his failings. Pride convinces him that he can stand above consequence, yet it is precisely this attitude that ensures his moral stagnation. By the end of the series, Tony is trapped in the very cycle his pride has created double to change, unable to grow and unable to escape. In the moral framework of the 7 deadly sins, pride is often considered the root of all others, because it elevates the self above all else. Tony Soprano embodies this truth completely. His need for respect, his denial of weakness, and his obsession with authority shape his life, his relationships, and his downfall. Pride is both his source of strength as a leader and the fatal flaw that consumes him, making him a tragic figure who personifies the deadliest of sins. A.J. Soprano Jr. grows up in the shadow of his powerful father and the criminal world surrounding him. Unlike Tony, who is consumed by pride and responsibility, A.J. embodies the opposite extreme, the deadly sin of sloth. In its deepest sense, sloth is not just laziness, but a refusal of effort, an avoidance of responsibility, and a withdrawal from the demands of life. Throughout the series, A.J. demonstrates this sin in his lack of ambition, his emotional passivity, and his inability to take meaningful action even when his future is at stake. From adolescence to young adulthood, A.J. consistently fails to apply himself. He drifts through school without motivation, squanders opportunities, and shows little drive to build a life of his own. While Meadow strives toward independence and accomplishment, A.J. retreats into inertia. His lack of energy is not mere immaturity. It becomes a defining pattern, a refusal to engage with the challenges of adulthood. Sloth, for A.J., manifests as apathy toward growth. This inertia extends to his emotional life. When confronted with the darker realities of his family and the world around him, A.J. does not respond with determination or resilience, but with withdrawal. He sinks into depression, spending long stretches of time listless, sleeping, or distracting himself with shallow pleasures. His breakdown after the breakup with Blanca and his attempted suicide in the family pool show how deeply sloth has infected his spirit. Faced with pain, he would rather stop living than struggle to overcome it. His passivity becomes self-destructive, highlighting sloth's danger as more than laziness. It is despair disguised as indifference. Even when Tony tries to give him direction, such as a job or role in the family business, A.J. resists. He briefly dabbles in surface-level activism, but his interest fades quickly, revealing it as another way of avoiding real responsibility. Unlike his father, who is constantly in motion, A.J. represents the opposite pole, the temptation to do nothing, to surrender to inertia rather than seize control of one's life. In the moral framework of the 7 deadly sins, sloth is not simply about failing to work hard, but about neglecting the purpose and vitality of life itself. A.J. Soprano personifies this sin in the way he drifts without aim, retreats from responsibility, and avoids the struggles necessary for growth. His apathy and despair make him a tragic figure, not because he is overtly evil, but because he cannot overcome the emptiness within himself. In a family defined by action, ambition, and sin, A.J. is consumed by the deadliest form of inaction, sloth.